There's no easy way to say this, but I'm sorry. No, I've not been inappropriate with fans or flogging supplements or engaged in any dodgy crypto scam, at least not this calendar year. And no matter what Prince Andrew says, I was not named in the Epstein papers, but I have done something maybe not quite as bad, but pretty bad. I've told you some wrong science, and I wanted to correct that. But it's also an interesting opportunity to learn a few points, I think, and I'll use myself as a case study through my embarrassment so that we can all get better. So I decided this year I was going to make these shorter, less prepared, more spontaneous kind of videos with less editing. I'm still doing the longer videos. That's always going to be my first priority. But in between, there's lots of fascinating stuff I read, which I don't feel the ability to make into a full video because it's not my field, but I thought I'd share in this format. And it turns out I'm very bad at that. And you do need to do your due diligence. And that's lesson number 1, is be aware of the limits of your expertise. Now, I'm obviously not a biologist. I have an amateur interest in biology. I've got, some undergraduate experience. My research project was in a lab. But it's fair to say, I've never portrayed myself in that way. I think that spontaneous style of video does require some extra care when you are outside your field of expertise for all the usual things you know about, Dunning-Kruger, the unknown unknowns and all that kind of stuff. So I had learnt about paracaryon myogenesis, which is the video I made before about this potential new form of life which was discovered in 2012, and I'd learned about it from an expert in the field. And then I'd also spoken to some biologists over the last few years. This is something I learned about a few years ago. So I figured, that was okay to at least make a short video. I'm not trying to go into great depth. And this is my mistake. My due diligence in this case, to bring myself up to date, I'm embarrassed to say, was a bit of Googling while I was supposed to be watching my son play tennis. That's lesson number 2. Don't be a bad parent. Pay attention to your children. The positive out of this is he is developing a fantastic backhand. I looked at the Wikipedia. I looked at, all the kind of top links and did a bit of cursory searching. That's not the correct way to do it. But I didn't see anything that changed my opinion about paracaryon myogenesis. So then I recorded the video, and only later a comment on a community post on the main channel, not even on any of the videos wherever I've posted them, so I'm grateful to that commenter, thank you, alerted me to the fact that in 2020 the authors published a follow-up suggesting that it probably isn't real, unfortunately. And this is the next lesson, and I think perhaps the most important, is that the initial dramatic discovery often gets all the press. And to be honest, there wasn't much press here. You can search for paracaryon myogenesis. You won't find a great deal, but at least it, got reported. Nick Lane was who I was quoting, and, he had talked about it on a few occasions. And the follow-up was in a much smaller journal, one I'd never heard of before, and just didn't even show up in the search results. And what they have said in the follow-up piece is that, to summarize, essentially they had taken almost a 2D section, a very ultra-thin section of the original, that was the original slide, the picture that we looked at, and they did some 3D reconstruction, which suggests that the endosymbionts, which we had looked at, which we thought maybe was a glimpse into how mitochondria might have looked when they first got absorbed into a prokaryote, was probably contamination. And actually, if you look at it from a 3-dimensional point, they noted that the cell wall was not intact, and these were probably just bacteria that had got inside after the main cell had died. So it's all a bit of a disappointing anticlimax. It doesn't quite explain everything. It's still a bit of an atypical finding, the atypical features in the cell. But that was one of the theories originally that Nick Lane talked about, which I didn't go into in the video because he felt that the one I presented was the most likely. And he said if it was an error, then why don't we see that error more frequently? So that's why I didn't mention it, but clearly that was the case. So several very interesting learning points there, and I do apologize. Maybe one day I will be doing the typical influencer apology video with my ukulele in hand, but today I'm afraid I'm apologizing for giving you misinformation. Thankfully, perhaps due to some subconscious forethought about my own idiocy, I hid this video on my second channel or on the TikTok account or Instagram where fewer people see it. So hopefully on the main channel, my threadbare credibility remains reasonably intact. But apologies, and I will try not to spread nonsense again. And maybe stick to medicine, Rohin.